everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Romantic Dinner with the DM.
My name is Prime, this is Arcad, and our guest for the day is the incredible Shauntelle, joining us all the way from Australia. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us. We are so excited to hear about your experiences and your stories, and it's just going to be a great time.
Well, in that case, let's jump right into it. So, our favorite way to start out is with the good old classic, if you can call it a classic. If there were a TTRPG version of Tinder, what would your bio look like?
My bio would probably say something like chaotic fae seeking people who are also chaotic but not too chaotic. Maybe a little bit chaotic, maybe a lot chaotic, it's fine.
Just enough to keep it interesting.
That's it. Just enough. I'm just a little bit enough, but err on the side of too much.
I love that. That's incredible. Oh, that's perfect. And so is that born from a love of chaotic characters or well, just actually, just give us your whole background. What is your background in TTRPGs?
Oh, okay. So that was two different questions. So yeah, for me, that's actually born of, I come from an acting background, and as much as I didn't like improv in theatre school, I love improv when it's long form improv and it's a load of characters just getting to do stuff at random. I love that. That's brilliant. My history with TTRPGs started with Dark Heresy, where I was playing because an ex-boyfriend of mine was playing. And I was just sort of watching the game every week. And the DM for that said, "You've been watching every week. Do you want to play? Do you want to just play a game now?" And I was like, "Oh, yes, actually. Yes, I do. Please." And so played my first game, and it turned out that my character was immediately antagonistic to my ex's character, which is hilarious because it became antagonistic in the relationship as well, which I feel like I shouldn't be saying in a romantic date, but
I mean, sometimes life imitates art,
awkward.
Imitates life, it's cyclical.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like foreshadowing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it kind of was in the best possible way. So then I moved on to D&D and stuck with D&D for a few years, and I do my best to play at least 3 or 4 new systems per year.
Oh, wow.
I think last year, let me see. Last year would have been about 6 new games, maybe 4 different actual systems, like the way they're built, the mechanics.
That's incredible.
So there's a lot in my head, and sometimes I'll play them simultaneously. So, for example, at the moment I've got a Monster Hearts game that I'm running. I'm playing a D&D game, and I'm also playing an Open Legend game, and all of them have different mechanics going in them, but they all sync up in my head. It's fine.
That's actually like a really, really incredible skill. Like, some of the systems obviously are more, akin to each other than others. But I imagine, especially if you're switching between, running one game, playing in another, and then balancing the systems on top of that, it must be like, do you kind of like prepare yourself as you go into each one? Like kind of say, okay, this one is D&D, wizards, elves, dwarves, here we go.
Not so much. When I say chaotic, I mean I will sit down and be like, okay, cool. So who am I today? What am I doing? What are the characters that are involved? What are the NPCs that are involved? What are the main drives for the characters? And then my way of playing is very much a mechanic as metaphor. So I won't require a role from someone unless there is a narrative reason for it. But at the same time, I won't expect to be rolling unless someone says that there is a narrative reason for something that I'm doing. So it's just about what kind of story am I telling today, more than anything.
Okay. And what sort of stories do you tend to like lean towards? A lot of when we've spoken to a lot of DMs, some folks say they lean the comedy is the most important part, and then drama takes a back seat. For others, it's all about the narrative, and they're happy with funny moments, but where do you sort of fall somewhere along that spectrum, or is the chaotic energy again pushing you in a different direction?
I sort of follow what it looks like my players need. Like there'll be days where, and when I say players, I also mean anyone that I'm playing with. So if I'm not running the game, I'll still bring whatever it looks like people need. So I guess that probably comes from I'm a psychologist, so that probably comes from that, is I look at people and I go, oh, you look like you're sad today. Anything I do is just designed to make you laugh. I'm just here to make funny today. And then there'll be other days where everyone seems like they're in a good place. So let's go heavy on drama. Let's go dark with this. Or, we've got this one particular player at the table. They like body horror. Let's go body horror. Or we'll pull that back because I know that you like body horror, but this other person doesn't like body horror. So we'll do a little bit. It's there. You can imagine it. We don't have to think about it too hard. So it just kind of depends on what's needed.
That's marvelous, that level of flexibility.
And I love that approach because, it can be said absolutely that D&D and TTRPGs and role-playing absolutely is a medium that can be therapeutic. And I feel that the way that you're describing, it's taking that to almost a whole other level of literally role-playing as a creative and mental and emotional outlet. And that's just amazing.
And that's exactly what I think TTRPGs are, or should, or not even necessarily should be, but can be. Because part of the reason why, because I'll play a lot in a week. I'll play a lot of different games, but it doesn't feel heavy. It doesn't feel difficult because I'm playing for my mental health. Sydney at the moment is in a lockdown. I can't go more than 5 kilometers from my house.
Oh,
basically
wow.
Means I'm here. I'm not doing anything. I'm working from home. I am at home. I can take my dog for a walk, but that's pretty much it. If I want to go to a different world, then I'm in a game. And I see that as hey, I'm ready for a holiday. Let's go.
Oh, that's perfect. Without ever leaving the comfort of your home.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
And I get to go with my friends. And it's pretty cheap too.
Yeah, we've talked about before, like pound for pound, TTRPGs have got to be one of the most cost-effective kind of hobbies out there because, imagination doesn't cost a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's always nice to have peripherals.
And it's just practice.
Yeah.
I have to digress for a moment because you mentioned your dog, and I assume that's the one in your banner on Twitter?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's Puck.
Oh, he's beautiful, or they're beautiful. We have one named Chase who has the exact same sort of like pattern on his face. And I saw the Twitter banner and immediately my heart went, oh my goodness, what a beautiful dog.
Border Collie?
Border Collie cross. Yeah, he's a Border Collie Pyrenees cross. And then we also have a Schnauzer Pug cross and a Dalmatian.
Oh my goodness, what a wonderful pack.
Right?
We have our own little menagerie. It's beautiful. Mm-hmm. But
yeah.
So to circle back, I'm getting us digressing already. But so with your time spent being a GM, being a player across all these different systems and games, and presumably different kind of like, actually, you know what, before I jump into that, have you mostly been playing online throughout your time with TTRPGs, or have you also played in person, I assume pre-pandemic?
Pre-pandemic, I was, like, my first games were in person. And then 2019, I was touring a show. 2019, I was touring a show, and that meant that the game that everyone else was playing at home, I was sort of online going, hey, listen to me, I'm over here, please.
Oh,
I'm in another state, help. But so now being online fully, it's a lot easier.
Yeah. And
I think for everyone.
And with everybody kind of on an equal playing field rather than you being, stuck off in the corner on an iPad or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly that.
So with that in mind, in both the digital and the physical space, which side of the table do you find yourself kind of gravitating towards? And you can take this, in the current, like right now in the moment, throughout your time playing TTRPGs, do you like running the games, playing the games, or a bit of a mix of both?
So it's really interesting you asked that question, because I ran my first game, like the campaign of my first game finished about a month ago.
Wait, your first
I only
game
ran my
ever?
first game. Yeah, running my first game. So fresh GM.
Amazing.
And I loved it. I adore it, actually. I really, really enjoy it. I think I think I'm going to need to play more as GM, and we're going to have another season of it. But at the same time, there's a lot of labor involved in being a GM that I didn't realize going into it, which is fine. I'm fine with that, actually, because I'm the sort of person that will do that labor. I'm fine with that. It's something that I think the more I do it, the more used to it I get, and the more used to it I get, the less I'll need to actively think about it. I like being on both sides of the table, and I think it's going to depend as well on what system I'm playing, what game I'm playing, who I'm playing with. There are some people that I gravitate towards because of the way that they build worlds, and there are some people that I gravitate towards because of the way that they engage characters. And the way that those people do those things sort of tell me which I would prefer.
I love that. That's a great approach too, because, I think one of the nicest things, and I want to dive into it a little bit more as well with the different systems that you run, is there are ways to support a story in the best possible way. And that doesn't mean that, doing it a certain way or doing it with a certain system or doing it with a certain group isn't still going to have a fun time or a good outcome. But sometimes, it's absolutely one of those things where a certain system, a certain game, and a certain group of people can just make an idea just seem so right. And I love the flexibility of leaving space for that.
I think my favorite game systems and my favorite people to play with in those systems are always going to be those who care about the story and care about telling a story together. So the people that aren't afraid to, I don't know, it would be really awful if my character rolled a 1 now. Oh, my character's rolled a 1 now. Now, what does this mean? Well, I mean, I can make it narratively fun and awkward, and you've just hit your friend, or we can do something different. Wait, no, hit my friend, because that means that the tension that we had between us in that thing before now has some significance.
Oh, I like that.
And that's what I love.
Just taking every possible opportunity, big or small, to really nudge the narrative forward.
Mm-hmm. That is, for me, that's the hallmark of a good game, is when it's not that everything is significant, but nothing is wasted. We're trimming the fat on all of the roles. So there's no point, combat for me in D&D, if it is not narratively interesting, why are we rolling?
I absolutely, I think both Prime and I really, really resonate with that. There's so many there's so many video games out there where you can just play a fight, roll some digital dice or what have you, and simulate that kind of basically a war of mathematics. But for it to actually have some narrative significance, it takes collaboration, and it takes a medium like this where you have that ability to do so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If I'm sitting with people to play this game, I want to know how they're hitting something. I want to know how hard they're hitting it. I want to know how they did it. I want to know what they used. I want to know if the character is bored with like using an Eldritch Blast or not, whether or not they feel like it's the same every time, whether it looks the same every time or feels the same every time. That kind of thing is really fascinating to me, because the way that we do things as people changes every time, whether or not we pay attention to it. Like over time, we notice changes in the ways that we engage with the world. And that's something that I really resonate with when it comes to the way that I play games.
That's incredible. And it's just, I think it's such a beautiful statement to, we were talking a little bit earlier about how this medium has so much room for imagination, right? Like all you really need is your imagination. And I can't even imagine the depth and the stories, like the narratives not only you're able to progress, but expand on and create, and these little moments that are possible when you focus on that, right? When it's not just, okay, here's an encounter, we're going to roll through it, now it's done. Instead, okay, here's an encounter, and what are we going to learn about ourselves? And what are we going to learn about each other? And what are we going to make of this beyond it just being a fight? Is that... That's amazing.
And the descriptive language. Descriptive language is one of my like absolute favorite things.
Mm-hmm.
Like I want to see it in my mind's eye.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And if I'm not seeing it in my mind's eye, I want to hear it, because a lot of my friends are voice actors or do podcasts or have amazing voices. So it's I want to, if you're not describing it to me in words, I want to know through your voice what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely. And so do you feel, so we were talking a bit about how you try and learn a few different game systems every year. What is the motivation behind that for you?
Part of it for me is that I am a game designer. I'm a writer. And sort of on the narrative side more than the mechanical side. I'm one of the writers for Omens Rising, which is a narrative game.
Cool.
Which is quite fun, and it's a beautiful, beautiful game. Some of the artwork that's coming out now, I'm so excited. But beyond that, I'm a writer and I love stories. Part of my background is in playwriting. Part of my background is in narrative, just storytelling and short stories and things like that. And so for me, everything is a story. So understanding different systems and understanding different games says when I open a new game and I look at it, I go, okay, so what kind of a story are you trying to tell? Like if I open Masks, I'm looking at a game that is designed to tell how these superheroes have looked after or protected a world while struggling with their own lives. If I open D&D, I'm looking at a series of fighters going out to change the world in a way that they think is really important. If I'm looking at Monster Hearts, I'm looking at a series of teenagers struggle with the concept of hormones.
And just learning about all these
They're all telling different stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And I find that, for me, so also, we do some writing, and I'm not quite ready to say writer yet, because I am still very firmly in the I get paid to write ad copy, which is fine. It's great. But I find
that's a writer.
Fair enough. You know what? You're right. I am a writer. So I too am a writer.
Yeah. Yes.
I find that just the creativity that is available through these stories and through these characters. So something that I've started doing is we run a game every Saturday with we don't run the game. We're players in a game. We're players in a game every Saturday with some friends of ours. And we've been having such a wonderful time. And it's our second campaign with this party. And both Arcad and I have just been inspired by the characters we've created and by the stories that have been happening both in the game and also things that we find don't quite have time that we want to expand on. Like outside of the game, writing about these moments from the perspective of the characters has been such a huge source of joy. And it just, for some reason, to me, feels so much easier to, write about this character that I'm thinking about all the time. And I'm thinking about, well, what would Morag be thinking about in this? And how would she be processing this? And then flowing that into a story, it just feels so just so cathartic.
Yes, it is. It's ultimate catharsis meets like depth of character, because the next time you go to play the character, the Morag's going to be deeper, is going to be more round and rich, and that's really exciting too.
Well, absolutely. And we've seen the ripple effect because we've started sharing the short stories that we've been doing. And so kind of after every session, I do like a little Twitter voice memo of Morag's diary of what she thought about it. And then we'll do our short stories and we share them with the party. And it's been actually palpable to notice the increase in the RP and the RP moments since kind of doing those things and giving those characters and that story like a broader creative side has just been so cool.
Oh yeah. Yes.
And that's absolutely something that I do as well. All of my characters, which is a lot of them now, all of my characters have diaries. They all have journals. And I always make sure that my GM, DM, storyteller, MC, they all see them. Because part of it is, if you know what the character's thinking, you can either subvert those expectations or you can run with them, and it's fun.
Exactly. It gives them more to play with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they know what I'm looking for, because they know what I'm picking up from what they're, what we're sharing in stories.
Right. That's just... I always get so excited whenever we're talking, to fellow, creatives and people playing and running these games, because it's just, the enthusiasm is palpable, and it always is it's so thrilling to just see the way that other people improve their own involvement in their worlds and just, create that enthusiasm. But before we actually jump into the next question, I want to take a little side tangent here, because Shauntelle, we haven't really had a chance to speak to someone, who's got as much understanding of, narrative design and writing and your experience within that realm. And you mentioned Omens Rising. We would love it if you would, share with us. I'm not sure what sort of phase the game is in right now, how much you can share, but we'd love to hear about it.
It is, sorry. I got excited and started dancing in my chair and then went, hang on, stay still and say something. So Omens Rising is a narrative focused tabletop game. It is, we've got to the point of playtesting and public playtesting, or at least streamed playtesting, so you can see it in game. And in fact, we've got a session 0. It's going to be over on my channel, Lost Worlds Archive, next week. This week is our session 0. As far as the game goes, we've got 12 different culture writers. All of the characters in the game are human. It's been described as an emotionally aware. It is emotionally self-aware as a game. So it is based on a deck of cards. It is based on how we interact with ourselves and the world. So all of the culture writers have had input into they've all had input into the way that aspects of the world have been built. We've all kind of come together and brought our cultures together, and we've built a world around that. The actual mechanics of the game work through using cartomancy to describe where you're at, what things can get in your way, what things might work against you. You can play a card to change fate, basically. But then there's a difference between fate and destiny. And so it becomes, which I still don't fully understand, despite having been working on this project for a year. I still don't fully understand the differences between fate and destiny, but I'm working on it.
Fair enough.
But the way that characters are built, for example, focuses on character experience and motivation and what their goals are and what their needs are. I think a full 80% or so of the team are neurodiverse in some way, and the vast majority are marginalized in some way. I feel as though it is arguably going to be one of the closest ways we can get to a decolonized game.
Oh.
In theory.
Okay. Can you, if you're able
We'll see
to,
how that goes.
yeah, can you dive into that a little bit as much as possible? I know it's sort of an esoteric concept, but love to hear more about it.
Yeah. So none of the cultures that exist have taken land from another culture. None of the cultures that exist, some of the cultures might be more insular, but that isn't necessarily seen as a bad thing. They're just quiet. They can be quiet. That's fine. No one is impinging on anything else. All of the cultures have had to move because something called the Great Decimation essentially changed the layout of the global map. So a continent that was in one place, due to overuse of magic, essentially, a continent disappeared from one place and popped up somewhere else.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which meant that the whole world changed, just disappeared, turned up somewhere else, and it just appeared somewhere else, and that continent is no longer in play, or was no longer in play. It was moved somewhere else. So all of the cultures that were here had to move, had to shift. Having gone through the Great Decimation, now these cultures are just about starting to reach out and touch other cultures. So you've got bundles of people that had cultural touchstones before the Great Decimation that kind of went, we need to pull together and look after each other in our own groups, because otherwise we're not going to survive this. And now they're just starting to reach out to the rest of the world and go, hi, I'm here. I notice you have this thing that you're using as, I don't know, a coat rack, but that's a really important thing to my culture. Can I have it back? Okay, yeah, cool. We didn't realize it was yours. It's a really good hat rack. It's really been very convenient. Take it. So that's the kind of thing we've been seeing in playtest.
That is absolutely incredible. And I know, for me, I'm shocked it took me as long to get into TTRPGs as it did, because, I've always been the drama kid. I've always been the one who was off making fantasy worlds in my head anyways. I would have loved to share them with folks, but it always felt very much, especially in high school, like it wasn't something that was for me, right? I remember the first time I wanted to play in a campaign, I wanted to play this cave person, and the first comment was, no, you can't do that because cave people weren't black. And it's like, okay, well, anthropology might disagree with you, but, sure, we're in grade 10, And so, but then, of course, when you strip it down, well, those are very European stories, right? Typically, what we see in D&D, it does focus on the European culture and the stories from there. And that's great and that's wonderful. But it does feel a bit, I guess...
overdone?
Well, not even over... Well, yes, overdone. But I think that the main thing is it feels like a disservice.
Yes.
That... We don't focus on telling the other stories. And I was out here just like, it would be really cool if there was a game system that was based on another part of the world. And here you've gone and created a game system that's built on an idea of a world that, goodness gracious, would have been so much better than, the history of colonization that we deal with. And I just, that is just... I can't even words because smile.
Yeah. Can you, Shauntelle, can you real quick shout out just for the listeners, because you mentioned it's going to be out. I think this episode will be out a little bit later than your debut session, but can you let the listeners know where they can sort of follow along with this? Because I have a feeling that a lot of people listening to this, their ears peaked up.
I already followed the Twitch channel.
Perfect. A lot of people's ears peaked up as you described Omens Rising. So where can people listen to it and watch it?
So the Twitter account for Omens Rising is just @Omens Rising. And the Twitch account where we're going to be playing the playtest with me will be at Lost Worlds Archive.
Beautiful. Amazing.
Marvelous. And we'll
All right.
include that in the description, of course, listeners, so feel free to check that out.
Oh, and so I guess this is as good a time as any, especially because you mentioned, you know, a lot of the folks involved in this are marginalized people and people with neurodiversity. And of course, something that is very, very important to us is not only folks striving for diversity, but also making sure that once they do include that diversity, they keep those marginalized people safe. And so for you, how do you keep your players safe when you're dealing with hard themes or when you're dealing with themes that might be particularly sensitive to certain folks?
So a couple of different things. Most of the games that I play are streamed. So I will be modded for all of that. There is always a session 0. Always. I make sure that everyone knows what everyone else's, not individually, but make sure everyone knows what everyone else's triggers are. If there are any that are relevant or any that are specific, because it's so easy to just sort of fall into oops. Anything like that happens, we stop. It doesn't matter what we're doing, we just stop. Because it's much more important that we make sure everyone's okay. We make sure that everyone's safe. I think that is, whether or not I'm a player whether I'm a GM or a player, it is always something that I'm keeping my eye out for. I'm always keeping an eye out for, you know, people's facial expressions. I'm keeping an eye out for the way people are engaging with content. I'm keeping an eye out for all sorts of things. The interesting thing with Monster Hearts is that it's a very, very specific game. Unlike D&D, where you know what it's going to be. It's essentially hack and slash with whatever story elements you decide to add, but you're only going to add those elements because that's what your players want. Mm-hmm. With Monster Hearts, it's intrinsically dangerous. It's actually an intrinsically dangerous game because it intrinsically requires you to be vulnerable in some way, shape, or form. And it's designed around the idea of the lines and veils. Like, it just is lines and veils. Like, it's a fascinating game because, for example, the vampire struggles with consent. That's the whole point of a vampire. They're biting people. Right. They're not asking people if they want to be bitten. They're biting people. Mm-hmm. So it intrinsically deals with things that are going to be dangerous. And so it's extra important to be like, okay, everyone on the same page. This is a point where I'm going to ask the character how they're going, but then I'm going to ask the player how they're going because they're two different things. Right. Let's make sure that they stay two different things.
Exactly. There's going to be, of course,
and there will be
overlap.
bleed.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's going to be bleed. I'm reading a book at the moment that says, hey, so character bleed is by design. It's not an accident. We play these games because of the character bleed. We play these games because we want to explore an aspect of ourselves through this avatar, basically. And that's fine. We just want to make sure that while we're doing it, it's safely.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think this system, obviously, you can apply the lines and veils to everything, and you should apply the lines and veils to everything. Mm-hmm. But I love the concept of this system where, it's essentially, it's not only rooted in it, it's grown completely from that tree. And that's, how it thrives. And that's magnificent. We hear, when it comes to keeping people safe, we hear a lot of, similar things like related to, the session 0 lines and veils. And, listeners, this is why you hear it on almost every episode, because it is essential. It is so important. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if you're whether you're participating in a game, whether you're running a game, whether you're a beginner or a veteran, it's something to always keep in mind. And if it is missing, take that as a danger sign. Take that as a warning. Speak to people about it, or find a new group.
Mm-hmm. And also, for sort of maybe new game runners out there, or anybody who's maybe kicking themselves right now, like, oh no, I didn't do a session 0. That's okay. It's not too late. You know, you can do a session 0 mid-campaign. That's actually awesome. Check in with everybody. Make sure everybody's okay. Make sure those character moments are character moments. We had a bit of a tense session this weekend, actually, and our DM was like, hey, I want to make sure if this is player or character. I'm like, well, you know, it's character, but as a player, I feel really good that we're sitting down and talking about this, because it's, you know, makes me as a person feel very valued, and I think it's very important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and as much as we love to talk about session 0, it doesn't have to end there. The number of times that I will mid-session just say to my players, hey, how's everyone going? How are our hearts going? How are the hearts? Hearts okay? Do we need a joke? Do we need to change genre for a bit? Do we need to switch it back? Do we need to change it up? All of those things are fine. We can still tell a great story, but keep it light.
Yeah. Oh, that's marvelous. This is how we're going to count to 20 from now on. We'll go 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 4, 5, 6, 0, 7.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's how it should be.
That is. Mathematicians everywhere. They're you know, they suddenly turned. They don't know why, but they suddenly felt very disturbed. Don't worry. Go back to what you're doing.
It's fine.
It's fine.
Yeah.
So
it's exactly what you wanted.
Exactly. So normally one of the things that we love to ask GMs, game runners, is this question. And I apologize, Shauntelle. We love tacking questions onto questions. So normally we would ask, you know, what is your ideal campaign, if you've got one rattling around in the back of your head, in terms of, you know, the length, the progression, the story, the game system. But I'm going to take that one step further with you. What is the ideal campaign? And if there is not yet a system in existence or a universe in existence for it, is there a universe rattling around in your head that you want to let out to then subsequently play that campaign within it?
Yes, there is a campaign. There is a universe. There is, there isn't, yes, there is a campaign. Technically, I'm running it at the moment. There is a world. It's not fully fleshed out. I feel like there's a full universe, and I feel as though there is a multi-system campaign in my head that I haven't managed to put down anywhere.
Well, that's all right. That's where all the great ideas start, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, I'm looking forward to it in a couple of years, I'm sure. I'm a big fan of real world, but twisted. So it would probably sit in that realm.
Okay.
For the most part. I'm also a huge fan of time travel, so that
it brings in some interesting elements. What sort of twist or twists do you like? Obviously, time travel is one in and of itself, but what other twists do you like to sort of throw in there? Do you tend to lean towards like horror or magic, like magical realism, or something else entirely?
I tend to lean toward psychological thriller.
Oh.
Ooh.
Psychologist. I can't help myself. I'll lean into a psychological thriller every time. And that doesn't mean that it won't be comedic. It doesn't mean that it won't be stupid at points. Because, my players just kept laughing at me because at one point I had 3 different NPCs hop on the back of one of my werewolf PCs back. Because who doesn't want to ride a werewolf at some point in their life? Especially if it's a dire wolf. You want that.
You've got to, yeah.
Absolutely.
Frankly, you must.
You really must.
Tense, really difficult scene. Really tense, really difficult scene. But every now and then an NPC would just be like, yeah, okay, now I am mounted on this werewolf and it's great. So yeah, it's very much that world that's sort of sitting in my head, and the nature of who I am means that I don't know if what is in my head is sort of a podcast, whether it's a play, whether it's a screenplay, whether it's a whole new game system. It could be all of those things.
I kind of hope it is.
I am chaotic, and that's it.
That's exciting. Oh,
Me also.
Yeah. Well, whatever form it takes, there's no doubt, like it's obviously still very much in a nebulous state, but it sounds like based on, what you've told us so far, that whenever it does end up finding its shape and its form and its outlet, that it's going to be in a way that people are going to be able to join you on this journey.
Oh, absolutely. That's always the game. That's always the aim and the game.
Marvelous.
beautiful.
And so with that, Shauntelle, would you like to play a game or a mini game of our own?
Ooh, let's.
It's a little chaotic, so I think this is going to be perfect.
It is. It is a little chaotic. So this will actually be so perfect with since you've just wrapped up your you've just wrapped up your previous campaign. So we'll work off of that one, if that's all right with you. But basically, we play this game each episode where it's sort of, think of it as the elevator pitch. You have 1 minute, and I'll start a timer. I'll count you in to describe your campaign in as much or as little detail as you choose to a stranger in an elevator who has never heard of TTRPGs at all. They're a mathematician. They don't know what's what. So it's completely up to your interpretation how you want to do it.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we will count you in and then, sell this elevator person on TTRPGs, I believe.
Yes. All right.
Okay.
Here we go. So 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, so it's Twilight, but instead of sad people, everyone is sad but also horny. The vampire just became a vampire and doesn't actually read fiction, so doesn't actually understand the concept of vampirism or why vampirism exists. The human is the only one who knows that the vampire is a vampire and the werewolf is a werewolf. They don't know about each other. We have a succubus that comes on in and ends up having a threesome with the werewolf and the werewolf's girlfriend. And it's really awkward because they didn't plan on that. That wasn't intentional, but they got a gift out of it. So that's great. The gift was never used in the campaign. The human, at some point.
Okay, so that's the minute. But I you know what? I don't want to stop you. Keep going.
I need to hear the last sentence.
Tell us
at
more.
Least. The human.
Tell us more.
What's the human up to?
What's the human doing in all this?
The human decides to do exactly what the vampire says, and instead gets turned into a ghoul by another vampire.
Oh my goodness!
Wow. Please tell me there's a major motion picture coming out of this. I need to watch this.
I'm the elevator person and I'm sold. I need more. I'm intrigued.
I will get right on that.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
Good.
That, oh my gosh. I'm so sorry for bursting out in the middle of that, but that was you. That is amazing. That might be the best elevator pitch I've ever heard. Mm-hmm. Shauntelle, you've got an incredible way with just your delivery, and I know actor, writer, improv, everything. It stands to reason, but just
it was beautiful to watch in action, though.
Absolutely,
to hear in action.
Absolutely.
And I have to admit, at the first sentence there, I immediately had a thought to myself where I was like, wait, isn't Twilight already horny? And then I was like, no, they're repressed horny. This is going to be much more fun. Exactly that. Oh, beautiful. Oh, beautiful.
That is fantastic. And so we'll jump right ahead into the next sort of bit here. So with whether it's through sort of that campaign, the one that you've just played, I'm kind of thinking it might be, or one of the other ones that you've maybe been a player in, what is the weirdest character, the one that stands out most in your mind from any campaigns, any games, any systems that you have participated in?
As in the weirdest character I've played or the weirdest character I've seen at all?
Either or.
The weirdest character I've played was a cleric who worked for the cleanup crew, who was a changeling and had a voice that shifted with the character, but largely was just big and boisterous and really annoying with everything. The weirdest character I've seen. That one's hard. You know what? The weirdest character I've seen is probably from the open legend game that I play in, where one of our players is the character is a 12-year-old boy, but the 12-year-old boy is 12 for the second time because he aged up to 30-something. Magic happened and he got merged with a dragon and now is aging backward.
That's pretty freaking cool.
Whoa, okay.
And when the dragon turns up, it's as if the characters are folding out or folding in like origami. So the character now has the nickname Origami Kid.
That's wild. I love that.
That sounds exceptional.
Yeah, it's pretty weird.
I know for me, I absolutely fall in love with very alien characters. You know, in any game, I love playing characters that are just unusual. They maybe they communicate in a very like a different way, or they view the world sort of on a slant is the way I like to think of it. And it's that's marvelous. I love that.
It's incredible. And so for you,
I'm a big fan of the this is just strange.
Yes. And for you, when you're running a game or when you're getting ready to sort of build a world, are there any hard no's that you have for character creation for your players, or are you ready to work with anything?
I'm collaborative in everything. And so when I don't build a world until I know what everyone is after. So for example, the game that I just ran, I was asked to run a game where the characters of Twilight exist. Like that was the premise for it. Okay. But the way that Monster Heart's system, the Monster Heart system works is you pick aspects for background and things like that. Everything was perfectly fine until and on track to be a Twilight repeat, basically, until the vampire was a fresh vampire, which meant that now vampirism exists in the world, especially if this character doesn't know about it, but they've managed to stay hidden pretty well. And the player playing the werewolf decided that she wanted the werewolf to have ancestral lycanthropy. So that meant that lycanthropy exists in the world, which means that other things exist in the world, because it doesn't make sense for just werewolves and vampires to exist. So all of a sudden I had this pop of characters just turning up that the characters, the players didn't know either, really, until they started to explore the world. The characters had no idea that there were other magical entities in the world.
Oh, that makes...
And so I don't have any hard no's.
That makes for such a exciting world. I think especially when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons, you know, partially because of the zeitgeist that it's having in terms of popularity, there's a lot of a situation where everybody knows, everybody's read, you know, the Dungeon Master Guide, they've read the handbook, they've read D&D Beyond countless times over. So it's very hard sometimes to throw something in there and say, oh, look at this magical, mystical creature. And they say, oh yeah, I read about that. It does this, 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 and this. And even if they manage to separate that from their player knowledge, you can't always separate that fully. And so, you know, this campaign that you were doing, where essentially you have the ability to throw absolutely anything at any time, and you're only limited by your own choices, your own scope and imagination, must have created for a lot of really suspenseful moments.
Yeah. Yes, there were a number of times where a character kept rolling to find out who was in charge of a scene. And it was always this one character, because this one character was a vampire, and they didn't know that. So they're just like, why is this random teenage kid in charge of this whole party right now when it's not his party? What's going on? But that's kind of what I would suggest for D&D as well. There is nothing stopping anyone from going, okay, well, let me take this stat block, and what do I need to be here? Let's just take a random stat block that is appropriate for the level that my characters are at, and let's create a world based on that. It doesn't matter what the stat block is, because the stat block is a bunch of numbers that will be appropriate. What do I want to make it look like?
That's a marvelous approach. And
that would be the way that I would build a world.
Yeah. And have you done that in specifically in D&D?
I haven't, because I am somewhat afraid of the numbers.
Very fair.
Very fair.
Somewhat afraid of numbers, but at the same time, also I feel like I probably wouldn't mind doing that. I feel like it would be kind of fun to build something in D&D, like just build an adventure that's entirely based on, hey, I'm gonna take the stats for a dragon and now it is a fairy. Good luck.
Oh my gosh, that's the
excellent.
misdirection of all time. I love it.
I will admit, I am learning quite a bit about myself from this, because I feel I also may be a bit chaotic, because that is generally how
You think?
maybe
You?
a little bit
chaotic?
a little bit.
My goodness.
Because I feel like that's how I build characters. Like right now I have an artificer, and yeah, they can hit with their wrench, and yeah, they have double attack, but who cares about that? They have two mechanical beasts. I can't play them both on one turn, and I don't care. They're the things that are interesting. So it's essentially...
Exactly.
She's an artificer, but really, she is probably some sort of ranger animal tamer who just does not fit any of the stats assigned to her, and it has been glorious. Absolutely glorious.
Absolutely.
That is how I play.
Yes.
I will have stats that do not make any sense at all, purely because that's what the character, like I'll just randomly assign things, and then I have to figure out a reason that this would happen. Why does this exist? Because if I can come up with it, then that means someone else in the world would be like that, so why not?
I love that. Yes to that.
Yes, absolutely. I think yeah, we've definitely all we're sort of in this kindred spirit kind of moment. I know we in our campaign, we just recently hit level 5, and I'm playing as a wild magic sorcerer. And I remember we were some of the other party members were asking, "Oh, you finally get 3rd level spells. Are we going to see a fireball? Are we going to see slow or haste or something?" And I said, "No. You're going to see fly, because my character is in love with the stars and he wants to touch them."
And it was perfect.
Yeah, that's a perfect. That is perfect. Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You just
That's
have
absolutely perfect.
Yeah. You just have to go with what the character wants sometimes.
Exactly. Oh. And so
Yes.
I know we touched on it a little bit earlier when we were talking about, incorporating the roles into that narrative and into that character development, and that idea of, oh, well, I hit a 1. Okay, well, you hit your friend, and how that is great sometimes for resolving tension or adding narrative. And so I just want to know, how do you feel overall about PvP in the TTRPG space?
I'm fine with it as long as everyone else is fine with it.
Awesome.
Like to me, it can be actually quite beneficial, because what we're doing to other characters is what we're doing to each other, and the whole idea of mechanic as metaphor doesn't hold if you're going to say, well, I'm going to pull my punch because I'm hitting someone else. I'm hitting someone I know rather than, a bugbear. I am gonna I was joking with someone the other day that there were all of those memes going around about, oh, would you hit your sister for, $1 million? Me and my sister both went, oh, great. Someone's going to pay us for what we're already doing? Let's do that. I'm not, I mean, casual abuse aside, like that, we care about each other. We know that what we're doing is not intended to be deep down, I'm hurting you because I'm trying to kill you. It's deep down, I care about you and I believe that this gesture is going to be received the way that I think this gesture is going to be received.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You understand me on this level. Do I think that insight rolls should be rolled against party members? Maybe. Depends. Specifically, insight rolls, interestingly, to me is an odd one. Because it kind of comes down, it's more of a case of, okay, you know them. Mm-hmm. So either you're rolling with advantage or you're rolling with disadvantage, depending on what they're doing.
Oh, that's an interesting approach. I hadn't considered that. Have you had these sort of like, whether it be through an insight roll or through, let's call it consensual PvP, have you had these happen in games you've been in, and how did it go? Things
like insight, I don't think I've ever had a DM who's allowed that roll. If I were going to allow, or I don't know if the role has come up, but I know that in the open legend game that I play in, one of the mechanics there is, if you spend 5 minutes talking to someone, you can learn a random fact about them. We've used that. That's happened because people will give away things about themselves just through talking for a bit.
Of course.
From an insight perspective, I just find it interesting because of the way that insight is built. Like, what's the true intention of anything? I mean, if my character is talking to your character because, like, my character has a crush on your character, then, like, now you know my character has a crush. What are you going to do with that information?
Right.
And is it narratively interesting for that to happen? And if the role fails, then what happens? Does it become more narratively interesting or less narratively interesting? It's just about whether or not the role benefits the story, I guess.
Which is, to circle right back to where we started, that's really what it is, what's most important to you.
Yeah.
That's excellent.
And in terms of PvP, I'll always say yes to PvP, but no to death. So we don't go to death saves or anything like that. Unless the characters are that level of angry and the players have consented. I'm very specific about, in fact, I was playing a game a couple days ago where someone said, okay, so my character is going to try to pick up your character and push them through a window. And I was like, oh yeah, the character says no, but I say yes. The character is not consenting. Character does not consent to this, but I think it's great. Do it.
That's magnificent. And then the holy grail of rolls, the roll for defenestration, please. Exactly.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
And for you, have you ever had, and this actually might even be a separate question, so I'll treat it as such, but so PvP aside, consensual PvP, how do you deal with player conflicts? If player to player, there's a problem or there's a disagreement or things are starting to get heated, what is your approach there for kind of, because, unfortunately the game, well, I guess fortunately on some level, but, game masters and universe creators, they do often have to play referee. So has that happened? And if so, how have you dealt with it?
Enough, it has happened incredibly rarely. Because, and I feel like it's largely because, one, I am chaotic, and everyone I play with knows that. So I don't know that conflict happens on that level between players. It might be a case of, hey, I feel like we need to follow the rules on this, or I don't. But usually it's a case of, okay, well, whose character is it about? Whoever's character it's about is the person that kind of gets to say, okay, on this occasion, this is what happens.
That makes sense.
That's fair.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. We follow through on consent. So I'm not going to say, for example, I'm not going to allow like a charm roll between player characters. Like, that's just not happening.
No.
Because it becomes non-consensual. Like, that's problematic. But when it comes to things like, but this is what the rule is. Yes, this is what the rule is, and mechanically you could probably do that. Is this what the player wants for their character? That's more important to me.
That makes sense.
Right. Because at the end of the day, we're all invested in our characters, but are works of fiction, works of imagination, whereas, real people have real feelings and real existence. Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes real reactions.
At the end of the day, yeah, exactly. And at the end of the day, like, we are playing this game together to tell a story together. That is the goal. If the goal is that we want to tell a story together, then we all care about telling the best story. We don't care so much about, I don't know, things like personal pride or personal struggle that's not, in terms of like hurt feelings. Like we don't want to hurt our feelings. We're playing this for fun, and we're playing this to engage in something that is not world.
Exactly. A sense of escapism sometimes, even for people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As someone who has, a lot of experience within, the TTRPG space, and especially one who, does so often in a public-facing context, right, via Twitch or podcast or whatever it might be, what sort of advice would you offer to new players who maybe, they've been caught up in all the excitement about TTRPGs, and more than likely, let's be honest, Dungeons and Dragons tends to be the starting point for a lot of people. What advice would you give to those people who are looking to join games, who are looking to join the community and jump into that huge ocean of potential?
If you're not having fun, you haven't found the right group. Try a different group, see what you think. And if the group is great, but you feel like you're not having fun for another reason, it could be the game is the wrong game for you. D&D is not for everyone. Vampire's not for everyone. Call of Cthulhu's not for everyone. None of these games are for everyone. They're not designed to be. There's no sort of universal system.
Right.
Find what you're after and then play that. I would be mindful of anyone that doesn't do a session 0. I would be mindful of anyone who tries to take away your autonomy. So if someone says, well, no, you have to do this now with your character because that's the way it's supposed to be. We're not doing that.
Right.
That's not it. Anyone who says, here, this is the character you're playing because this is what I want to play against, not okay. Just keep an eye out for anything that feels like you're not in charge of it, of yourself, not of everything, but of yourself.
Right.
Make sure that you feel that you are in control of your own person and person, fictional one. Other than that, the TTRPG community can look daunting, can look really scary. On Twitter, everyone seems to know a lot. We don't. We're all really good at opinions.
That's Twitter in a nutshell.
I like that.
Yeah, we all have opinions. None of us knows because there's no course for it. There's nothing standardizing anything. And if there were, I would kind of knee-jerk reaction say, no, you're wrong. It's very much like improv. Just create what you want to create. Have fun with what you want to have. Not everything is going to be for you, but also some things will be for you, but not for other people, and that's cool.
I love that. And honestly,
keep chill.
Yeah. And that would be my knee-jerk reaction too. It's like, no, don't standardize the things that are open form. Leave the open form.
I put this forum and I left the door open for a reason. Leave the door open, please.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Don't go closing doors unless you're asked to. And so if we want to sort of culminate, all of our discussion down here into sort of like one what's the word I'm looking for?
Oh, the biggest question.
The biggest question, the hardest question, the one that won't stump you, but you might think about it for a sec, is, with for yourself, there's so many elements of TTRPGs and of role-playing games that have obviously, captured your interest based on other interests that you have. But what is it about TTRPGs specifically, and running games, GMing, controlling that world, that has captured your interest and your passion in this way, Shauntelle, that's made it so that you've got universes rolling around in your mind? What is it that has grasped you so strongly and refuses to let go?
There's a couple of things. The first one is that it's long form. So in improv, you would tend to do a couple of scenes. You might do a scene. In a play, you have a scene. In a video game, it goes for a certain period and then it stops. A novel will have a series and then it stops, and you're not in control of the novel, you're just kind of there for it. In TTRPGs, the story goes for as long as the story goes, and it continues to go, and it continues to grow. And one of the things that I love about TTRPGs is that the things that happen in a game actually form visual memories for people.
Mm-hmm.
There was something that one of my players said, because another one of the players was making a trailer for the next session. And what they said was, I'm so confused by this trailer because it's just us sitting there talking. In my head, it is not that. In my head, it is a whole world. We are walking, we are moving, we are doing things. But if you make a trailer of it, it's just our voices. And I love that.
It's powerful.
Yeah. I love that the story is in the middle of the room. Like you just sit there and people are just throwing ideas up and doing things and rolling dice or pulling cards for chaos and for, I don't know what the outcome of this is going to be. So, okay, let's roll and see. Let's find out. And none of us knows what the outcome's going to be until we've rolled.
That's beautiful.
That really is. Yeah.
I love that. And as you said it, I realized, yes, absolutely. I mean, even we had our most recent session Saturday, and I've been thinking about it, and I see the farm and I see the characters and even just that sentence there. And I was like, oh, that was all sitting at my desk. That's crazy. No, yeah. I was there.
Yeah.
I was there. I saw the things. I saw the trees. I saw the wolves. It couldn't have just been sitting in a voice call at my computer, but I like to truncate it kind of into like it's imaginary events, but it's real memories, Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, that's incredible.
And so to sort of wrap the episode up here, Shauntelle, we like to do sort of a, as you mentioned earlier, we get deep, and then we come out with something a little bit fun, a little bit silly,
and then we get a little deep again,
We go up and down.
You gotta end it on depth, but
exactly.
So we'll take a second here, and we're just gonna do a cheeky little alignment personality quiz. So earlier today, we sent you a list of some phrases. Did you have a chance to look at them?
I did, yes.
Excellent. And were there one or a few that stood out to you more than others?
Yes. Let's try something new.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll let you roll for it.
Beautiful. Excellent. All right. So what I'll do is I will read these two descriptions, and then afterwards, please give us your thoughts and let us know if this beautiful internet guide has been able to determine some of your DM style. All right, so let's try something new. Falls under chaotic good. And so it says, chaotic good DMs experiment and toy with the gaming system, perhaps even going so far as to produce their own, go off the books altogether, or even throw in seemingly unrelated games like chess or poker to change the pace. So long as everyone is enjoying themselves and the story is good, the rules can take a back seat. And I'll let you roll for it. That is true neutral. Neutral is a hard balance to strike. It's not perfection, as everyone's technique is personal. Perfect is what's right for you. But a neutral DM finds a path between permissive, strict, threat, and reward that usually appeals to everyone. The generalized approach draws from tips and tricks from a long practice and playing multiple systems across a long gaming history. Your thoughts?
I mean, that's pretty accurate, actually.
Right?
That's kind of scary.
Right?
Oh no, I've been
excellent.
deceived.
That's amazing. It's so funny. Like prior to this, if someone had asked you, Shauntelle, what alignment are you? Although obviously there's billions of flaws with the alignment system we won't jump into right at the moment. But what would you have answered with that question?
I would have said chaotic good.
Nice.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, actually, it's pretty accurate.
That's excellent. Oh, wonderful. And I want to ask, actually, while we're on the alignment, because you do so many different systems, do you find that the alignment system is something that kind of traverses all of them, or is the motivation system sort of a more tried and true way to build a better narrative?
I don't know if I know the motivation system.
Oh, it's fair enough. I honestly know very little about it, besides that a few of the game runners that we've talked to have said that instead of alignments, they tend to ask what the motivations behind the characters are, to kind of leave it a bit more ambiguous.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I mean, that I will say both. The way that I use alignment isn't in the traditional D&D form. So the way that I'll use alignment is so good to evil is just whether or not you're self-sacrificing or selfish.
That makes sense.
That's the way that I think of alignment. Yeah. So someone that's evil isn't necessarily a bad person. It just means that they will do things that benefit them before they'll do something that will benefit everyone. Whereas someone that's good could be a bad person, but is trying to follow the greater good. So arguably, what's his name from Marvel movie? Avengers. There we go.
Okay.
My brain has no words in it. Getting rid of half of the population, arguably, good, greater good. Therefore, it doesn't mean you're a good person. It just means sacrificing.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. I really like that.
Oh, and that if we're running with that puts Tony Stark pretty firmly into evil, but his alignment shifts as the movies go on, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Exactly.
I like
excellent.
that. That's a really good approach.
Yeah, so I'm just a lot less judgmental of like whether or not good or evil, like the way that good and evil work. That said, one of my favorite things to ask of a player is, okay, but what are you trying to do to them? Like, what are you doing in this moment? Like, what are you actually trying to achieve? What are you trying to get them to do for you? What are you trying to get them to agree to? How are you trying to change them? So the motivation system is kind of probably exactly what I do, but I feel like that comes from acting. That doesn't necessarily come from tabletop.
Right.
I love that. And I think you're entirely right, because I firmly feel like sometimes the alignment system can be a little bit restrictive, especially based on how folks perceive it, right? Because we've all heard those horror stories of somebody who's just kind of a jerk and will always be like, oh, well, it's what my character would do. They're evil. And it's like, well, but I think that's a cop-out, because somebody to be quote-unquote evil or to have quote-unquote evil motivations, they don't need to be a mean person. They don't need to be a mean-spirited person. There's so much more depth that can be explored. And so I think that that's just a really beautiful way to allow narratives more space to grow than to keep it, kind of like we were talking earlier. It's not as fun when it's just a Skyrim style XYZ and now the fight is over. It's so much more captivating, and it feeds the creativity and the imagination so much more when you have that freedom of, well, what's your perception of evil? What's your perception of what you're doing? And what's your motivation behind what you're doing versus just, well, are you going to be good or bad? Because that's so subjective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's been something that I've I ended up, and it's funny because one of the other options was, sure, you'd do that, but would your character? There have been a couple of times where, in the game that I just ran, one of the players was very attached to the idea that their character was a bad person. I was like, yeah, but no villain thinks that they're bad. They think they're doing something for good. They think that whatever they're doing, it is good. It is a good thing to be doing, and so they're not bad to them. And it's going to make it more difficult for you to assume that whatever they're doing is a bad thing. And because Monster Hearts specifically is a very toxic game, like it's designed to be awful. Like the characters in there can be pretty horrible to each other. Because it's designed that way, it doesn't help you if you spend a lot of time judging the character or judging yourself for the way that you are behaving when you're working in service of the character's motivations.
Absolutely.
I love it.
And then, arguably, the other hardest question of the night, one of the very most important questions. What are your thoughts on inclusion and diversity in the TTRPG space that you think people need to hear?
That I think people need to hear. I feel like that's the hard part, isn't it? Inclusion and diversity. Inclusion should be a given. Diversity should be a given. Your stories are going to be broader, they're going to be warmer, they're going to be richer if you work on both of those things. There's something that I read a while back that kind of opened my eyes a little bit, because despite the fact that I am Black, I kind of went, why is white so homogenous? Like, why just white? Because there's so much diversity there's such a large range of cultures throughout Europe and throughout the world, really. There are so many different cultures in all of these different places. Why is it that all of these things are being made into one? And as much as it binds into the whole, not all Black people are from Africa, not all Black people are from the US, not all, it's all of those things. But you can say the same about white people, and I just don't understand why people who are seemingly afraid of diversity are so afraid of something that could benefit them so greatly.
Absolutely.
Well put.
Because the second you start to broaden the story for the people that look different to you, the more you can start to look at what your own story is.
Absolutely. And I think that makes so much sense, right? Like, we talk a lot, especially lately, about how, difficult it is sometimes to be, a marginalized person on the internet and on Twitch and that sort of thing, and how, not all Black people are a monolith. But that's true across the board, right? Like, just including individual stories and diverse stories, just for the sake of even expanding your own experience by making the door open for somebody to come teach you about something that you can't possibly know. How could that ever be a negative?
Exactly.
Yeah. It's fascinating. I find it all fascinating, the idea that people are so much more comfortable with fantasy if it is one particular way. They're more comfortable with story being a particular way, and it shows quite strongly in the way that we interact with our games, like what is acceptable, what is not, the way that some people play D&D versus the way other people play D&D, and you'll find that a diverse group of people playing D&D is going to have a completely different interaction with the mechanics, and I find that really interesting to see.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, well, I hope that your romantic breakfast was excellent, Shauntelle, thank you so much for joining us today and just for the incredible conversation and the wonderful thoughts and experiences that you've had. It's been awesome. It's been excellent.
It really has. And we've sort of touched on a few of them throughout the show, but let's take this as a moment to really, this is the plug moment. Talk about what you're working on, things you're passionate about, anything you would like people to look at, listen to, and experience. And the floor is yours.
Well, I am Shauntelle. You can find me at ShauntelleB on Twitter. You can find a load of my writing over at wordswithcolor.com. I've got both of them, Words with Color and Words with Color, spelt the English way and the US way, because that is important. And there you can find pretty much everything I do. In my Twitter bio, you'll find a link tree that will take you to pretty much everything I do. So I'm one of the narrative designers on Omens Rising, which is at Omens Rising. I am playing currently in a game of Open Legend, and that campaign has been running for 2 years now, I think. But it is we like to call it dramedy because it is dramatic comedy. It's a load of actors playing what started out as D&D, and we moved to Open Legend so that we could broaden out the story a little bit more. If you head to my link tree, you'll also see a link to the VODs for the first game that I ran, which is kind of cool because you get to see me look really, really nervous. I also very recently finished up reviewing Hunter x Hunter, which is an anime. And I did that over on my husband's YouTube channel, which is New World Review. And you'll find a link for that in my link tree also. There will be games coming. There are a lot of things on the way. We all bow to our patron saint NDA.
Of course.
And thank you so much for having me.
Well, it has been our pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us for this romantic breakfast / dinner / mealtime.
And for the listeners out there, I've got our question of the episode for you, and it's going to be very pointed, but I'm very, very excited to know. So let me know what y'all think of Omens Rising. I will be hanging over on the Twitch channel, so, excited to talk about it with folks.
Yeah, we'll be seeing it there with you.
Yay.
Perfect. And so with that, thank you everybody so much for listening to A Romantic Dinner with Shauntelle, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Romantic Dinner with the DM. We are so excited to have you on our journey as we learn about the worlds and stories created by dungeon masters and game masters in this wonderful, wonderful medium of TTRPGs.
We've got new episodes coming out weekly, and if you're jonesing for new content in between, check out our YouTube.
Link below.
And follow us on twitch.tv/Arcad and Prime.
We'll see you next week and really hope that you enjoyed the episode. Bye.